The morning started like any other aboard the research ship Terra Nova. Dr. Hana Kim checked her equipment one final time before the landing team prepared to explore the third planet in the Kepler 442 system. The world below looked promising. Through the ship's sensors, blue oceans, green continents, and an atmosphere that could support human life without suits. "Ready for another boring rock survey?" asked Captain Martinez as he walked past her station. Hana smiled and shook her head. "Every new world teaches us something. This one might surprise us." She had no idea how right she would be. The landing party consisted of 12 people. Scientists, security officers, and engineers all working together to catalog what they found. Hana's job was to look for signs of life: plants, animals, bacteria, anything that might help humanity understand how life developed across the galaxy. The planet's surface was beautiful. Rolling hills covered in purple grass stretched toward mountains that sparkled like crystals in the orange sunlight. Strange bird-like creatures with 4 wings soared overhead, singing songs that sounded almost like music. "Fascinating," Hana whispered as she collected samples of the purple grass. "The cellular structure is completely different from Earth plants, but it serves the same function." The team spread out across the landing zone, each person focused on their own tasks. The security team established a perimeter while the scientists worked. Everything seemed peaceful and safe. That changed when the sky turned dark. At first, Hana thought it was just clouds moving across the sun, but clouds did not make the humming sound that now filled the air. She looked up and saw something that made her blood freeze. A massive ship hung in the sky above them. It was black as space itself and shaped like a giant blade. Strange symbols glowed red along its hull, and smaller ships began pouring out of openings in its sides. "Contact the Terra Nova!" Captain Martinez shouted into his radio. "We need immediate extraction!" Static answered him. The smaller ships landed around the human team with a sound like thunder. Creatures emerged that Hana had never seen before. They stood on 2 legs like humans, but were much taller and broader. Their skin was gray and covered in what looked like metal plates. Red lights glowed where their eyes should be. "Do not move," one of them said in perfect English. Its voice sounded like grinding metal. "You are now property of the Vorthak Empire." Captain Martinez raised his weapon, but before he could fire, a blue beam struck him. He fell to the ground, his body twitching, and then going still. The smell of burned flesh filled the air. "Anyone else wishes to resist?" the creature asked. No one moved. The Vorthak soldiers surrounded the humans and forced them toward the ships. Hana's mind raced as she tried to understand what was happening. These creatures knew their language. They had been watching humanity. This was not a chance encounter. "Move faster," one soldier growled, pushing Dr. Williams so hard he fell. Hana helped him stand. Williams was old and had trouble walking on rough ground. The soldier raised its weapon again. "Please," Hana said quickly. "He's just slow. We'll keep up." The soldier stared at her with those glowing red eyes. "You speak for the weak one? I'm a doctor. It's my job to help people." The creature made a sound that might have been laughter. "You will learn that helping others is weakness. The Vorthak do not tolerate weakness." They were loaded into the ship like cargo. The interior was cold and smelled of metal and something else Hana could not identify. The walls pulsed with red light, and the floor felt warm under her feet. Hana found herself pressed against other members of her team in a small holding area. The ship's engines started with a sound that vibrated through her bones. Through a small window, she watched the beautiful planet shrink away as they rose into space. "What do they want with us?" whispered Dr. Chen, a geologist who looked like he might be sick. "I don't know," Hana replied. But she was already forming theories. Species that could travel between stars and speak other languages did not capture people randomly. They had plans. The journey took 3 days. The Vorthak gave them water and something that looked like gray paste to eat. It tasted terrible but provided energy. Some of the humans refused to eat and grew weak. Others, like Hana, forced themselves to consume it. Staying strong seemed important. During the journey, Hana observed everything. The Vorthak soldiers moved with mechanical precision. They never seemed to tire or rest. When they spoke to each other, they used a language of clicks and hums that hurt human ears. But most importantly, she noticed that they wore devices on their heads that glowed the same red as their eyes. The devices connected to their armor with thin wires. Technology of some kind. Everything about these creatures seemed connected to their machines. On the third day, they arrived at their destination. Through the window, Hana saw a world that looked like a nightmare. The surface was covered in metal buildings that stretched toward a blood-red sky. Ships moved constantly between the structures like a swarm of insects. "Welcome to Koros," said the Vorthak leader as the ship landed. "Your new home." They were marched off the ship into a facility that looked more like a laboratory than a prison. White walls lined with strange equipment, tables covered in tools Hana did not recognize, and everywhere the sound of humming machinery. A new Vorthak met them in the main hall. This one was different from the soldiers. Its armor was silver instead of black, and it carried itself with obvious authority. When it spoke, the others listened. "I am Molek," it said. "I am the chief researcher of this facility. You have been brought here to help us understand your species. Some of you will be more useful than others." It walked slowly in front of the humans, studying each one. When it reached Hana, it stopped. "You are the one who spoke for the weak one on the planet's surface." "Yes." "What is your function?" "I'm a xenobiologist. I study alien life forms." Molek's red eyes seemed to brighten. "Interesting. You study other species to understand them?" "That's right. Then you will understand us, and we will understand you." It gestured to two soldiers. "Take this one to Laboratory 7. Take the others to the holding cells." As the soldiers grabbed her arms, Hana looked back at her fellow humans. Dr. Williams was crying. Dr. Chen looked terrified. Captain Martinez was still unconscious from the weapon blast. "Don't give up," she called to them. "Stay strong. We'll find a way through this." Molek made that grinding laugh sound again. "Optimistic. We will see how long that lasts." The laboratory was filled with equipment that looked both advanced and brutal. Tables with restraints, machines with needles and cutting tools, containers filled with organs floating in green liquid. "Your education begins now," Molek said, as the soldiers forced Hana onto one of the tables. "The first lesson is simple. You are no longer human. You are a specimen. And specimens exist only to provide data." The restraints locked around her wrists and ankles. Molek picked up a device that hummed with energy. "This will not kill you," it said. "But you will wish it would." The pain that followed taught Hana her first lesson about the Vorthak. They were very good at causing suffering. But as the agony washed over her, she held on to one thought. She was still alive. And as long as she was alive, she could learn. She could observe. She could plan. The Vorthak thought they had captured a helpless human scientist. They had no idea what they had really taken. 4 years. That's how long Hana had been in the Vorthak research facility when she finally understood their greatest weakness. The first year had been the worst, daily experiments that pushed her body to its limits. Molek seemed fascinated by human healing abilities and tested them in terrible ways. Broken bones that were allowed to heal naturally, cuts that were monitored as they closed, injections of Vorthak diseases to see how human immune systems responded. But Hana never stopped watching, never stopped learning. She discovered that the Vorthak had experimented on hundreds of species over thousands of years. The facility held prisoners from across the galaxy. Most died within months. A few, like herself, proved useful enough to keep alive. In the cell next to hers lived Tyke, a member of a species called the Zerathi. He looked almost human except for his blue skin and the small horns that grew from his forehead. The Vorthak had captured him 5 years ago when they destroyed his homeworld. They took everything, Tyke told her one night through the small gap between their cells. My family, my people, my world, all for their experiments. What did you do before? Hana asked. I was an engineer. I designed ships and weapons for my people's defense fleet. His voice turned bitter. A lot of good that did us. Through Tyke, Hana learned about other species in the facility. There was Minho, another human who had been captured from a different colony ship. He had been here for 2 years and had grown quiet and withdrawn. There were also creatures she had never heard of before. The insect-like Cathera, who could survive without food for months. The plant-based Florians, who could regrow lost limbs. But they all had one thing in common. They were slowly dying. Not from the experiments, though those were brutal enough. They were dying from hopelessness. The Vorthak were very good at breaking spirits along with bodies. Hana refused to let that happen to her. During her time in Laboratory 7, she observed everything about her captors, the way they moved, spoke, and interacted with their technology. She learned that every Vorthak wore a device called a neural crown. The red glowing circle on their heads was not just decoration. It was how they connected to their ship computers, weapons, and even each other. The crown is everything to them, she explained to Tyke one night. Without it, they're almost helpless. I've seen them panic when the power goes out and their crowns stop working. So what? Tyke whispered back. Knowing their weakness doesn't help if we can't use it. But Hana had been thinking about that too. She had noticed that human vocal cords could produce sounds that seemed to affect Vorthak equipment. During one experiment, when she screamed from pain, several machines in the laboratory had flickered. Molek had seemed puzzled by this and adjusted the equipment. Our voices, she told Tyke. There's something about human voices that interferes with their technology. Over the following months, Hana began testing this theory carefully. She would hum quietly during experiments, varying the pitch and frequency. She noticed that certain sounds made the monitoring equipment fluctuate. The Vorthak never seemed to notice, but Hana kept careful mental notes. She also learned their language. The clicking and humming that had hurt her ears at first became understandable, with time and practice. The Vorthak spoke freely around prisoners, assuming they could not understand. This gave Hana access to information about their operations, their weaknesses, and their plans. What she learned horrified her. The experiments were not just about understanding alien biology. The Vorthak were developing biological weapons. They planned to use what they learned to create diseases that could wipe out entire species. Earth was on their list of targets. They're going to destroy my world, she told Minho during one of their brief conversations in the exercise yard. Everyone I ever knew, everyone I ever loved. Minho just stared at the ground. There's nothing we can do. We're prisoners. We'll die here like all the others. But Hana refused to accept that. She began reaching out to other prisoners, building connections. Tyke became her closest ally, but she also made contact with some of the longer-term prisoners. There was Juna, a female Kithera who had been here for 7 years. Her species was known for their patience and tactical thinking. There was Voss, a Florian who could communicate through chemical signals that the Vorthak could not detect. Slowly, carefully, Hana built a network of information and support. She learned about the facility's layout from prisoners who had been moved between different laboratories. She discovered guard rotations and security protocols. Most importantly, she identified other prisoners who still had the will to fight. You're planning something, Molek said to her one day during an experiment. I can see it in your eyes. The fire that most prisoners lose after the first year. Hana looked directly at the Vorthak researcher. I'm a scientist. I observe and learn. That's what I do. And what have you learned? That every system has flaws, every design has weaknesses. Every empire eventually falls. Moloch made its grinding laugh sound. You think you can defeat the Vorthak Empire? We have conquered 1,000 worlds. We have destroyed civilizations that were old when your species was still living in caves. Maybe, Hana replied. But those civilizations probably fought you the way you expected them to fight, with ships and weapons and armies. They tried to match your strengths. And you would do differently? Hana smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. I would use your strengths against you. The conversation seemed to amuse Molech, but Hana noticed that the researcher increased security around her after that. More guards, more monitoring equipment, fewer opportunities to communicate with other prisoners. But it was too late. The network was already in place. By her 4th year in captivity, Hana had identified 17 prisoners across the facility who were willing to risk everything for a chance at freedom. She had mapped the facility's key systems and identified its vulnerabilities. Most importantly, she had perfected the frequency that could disrupt Vorthak neural crowns. It was a specific combination of tones that human vocal cords could produce when properly trained. The sound waves interfered with the crown's connection to the wearer's nervous system, causing temporary paralysis and confusion. Tyke had helped her understand the technical aspects. It's brilliant, he admitted. Their greatest strength becomes their greatest weakness. They've become so dependent on their technology that they've forgotten how to function without it. The question is, Hana said, can we coordinate 17 different species to act together at exactly the right moment? You've spent 4 years building trust and relationships, Tyke replied. If anyone can do it, you can. The plan was simple in concept but complex in execution. During the next facility-wide testing session, when all the prisoners would be brought together in the main laboratory, Hana would produce the disruptive frequency. The other prisoners would then overpower the confused guards and seize control of the facility's systems. Simple, if everything went perfectly. What about after? Minho asked during one of their secret meetings. Even if we escape this place, where do we go? How do we fight an entire empire? Hana had been thinking about that too. One step at a time. First we get out. Then we warn others. Then we find a way to fight back. And if we fail, then we die trying. But at least we die as fighters, not as victims. The night before the planned escape. Hana lay in her cell thinking about the journey that had brought her here. 4 years ago, she had been a scientist studying alien plant life. Now she was planning the largest prison break in Vorthak history. The scared woman who had been captured on that beautiful planet was gone. In her place was someone harder, smarter, and more determined than she had ever imagined she could be. Chakra. Vorthak had tried to break her. Instead, they had forged her into something they had never encountered before. A human who understood their weaknesses better than they understood them themselves. The day of the escape started like any other day in the Vorthak facility. Guards moved through the corridors with mechanical precision. Prisoners were dragged from their cells for another round of experiments. The air hummed with the sound of machines and suffering. Hana tried to keep her breathing steady as the guards came for her. After 4 years, she knew the routine by heart, but today was different. Today, 17 prisoners across the facility were waiting for her signal. The main laboratory was larger than any room Hana had seen in the facility. It was designed to hold multiple test subjects for comparative experiments. Perfect for what? Molech called efficiency testing, seeing how different species reacted to the same stimuli. As Hana was strapped to her table, she counted the other prisoners being brought in. Tyek was there, his blue skin pale with tension. Minho avoided eye contact, but she could see his hands shaking. Juna clicked her mandibles in what Hana had learned was the Kithara equivalent of prayer. 17 prisoners, 23 Vorthak guards and researchers. The numbers were not in their favor, but numbers had never been the plan's strength. Molech entered the laboratory with its usual authority. The silver neural crown on its head pulsed brighter than usual, indicating high activity in the facilities. Central computer systems. Today we test pain tolerance across species, Molech announced to its assistants. Begin with low-level electrical stimulation and increase gradually until we reach the subject's breaking point. The first machines powered up with a whine that made Hana's teeth ache. She had endured this type of experiment dozens of times, but today, she was not just a victim. She was a weapon waiting to fire. The electrical current hit her first. Pain shot through her nervous system like liquid fire. Around the room, other prisoners began to scream as their own torture began. But Hana listened through the agony, waiting for the right moment. The sound she needed to make required precise timing. All the guards' neural crowns had to be active and synchronized with the facility's main computer. That only happened during major experiments when they needed to share data in real time. Increase the intensity, Molech ordered. The pain doubled, tripled. Hana's vision started to blur, but she forced herself to focus. The red lights on the guards' crowns were pulsing in perfect synchronization now. The moment was coming. Fascinating, Molech said, studying the readouts. The human shows remarkable resistance to neural disruption. Increase again. Now. It had to be now. Hana opened her mouth and began to sing. It was not a beautiful sound. The frequency she produced was harsh and discordant like metal scraping against glass. But it was exactly the right wavelength to interfere with Vorthak neural crown technology. The effect was immediate and devastating. Every Vorthak in the room suddenly stiffened. Their red eyes flickered like dying flames. The crown lights went from steady red to rapid, chaotic blinking. Then, one by one, the Vorthak began to fall. Some collapsed completely. Others stumbled around like they were drunk, unable to coordinate their movements. A few managed to stay upright but stood frozen, their neural crowns smoking as circuits. Overloaded! Now! Hana shouted, her voice raw from the frequency song. Tyke was the first to move. His species was naturally strong, and he snapped his restraints with a sound like breaking wood. He rushed to the nearest guard and grabbed the Vorthak's weapon. Juna used her insect-like agility to slip free of her bonds and began releasing other prisoners. Her natural armor allowed her to ignore the sparks flying from damaged equipment. Minho hesitated for a moment, staring at the chaos around him. Then something seemed to snap inside him, and he threw himself at the nearest guard with a roar of 4 years' worth of rage. The laboratory erupted into controlled chaos. Prisoners who had been victims minutes before became warriors. They moved, with purpose, following the plan Hana had spent months developing. "Secure the weapons," Hana called out as she freed herself from the smoking remains of her restraint table. "Tyke, get to the computer terminal. Juna, seal the doors." But not all the guards had been completely disabled. Some of the Vorthak further from Hana's position were beginning to recover. Their neural crowns flickered back to partial function, and they raised their weapons. Blue energy beams filled the air. One caught a Florian prisoner in the chest, and he fell with a cry that sounded like wind through leaves. Another barely missed Tyke as he dove toward the main computer terminal. "I need more time," Tyke shouted, his fingers flying over the alien interface. "Their security systems are more complex than I expected." Hana grabbed a weapon from a fallen guard and began covering him. The Vorthak beam weapon was heavier than human firearms, but it felt good in her hands. She had dreamed of this moment for 4 years. A partially recovered guard aimed at Tyke's back. Hana's shot caught its center mass, and it fell with a grinding. "Sound like broken machinery." "How much longer?" she asked Tyke. "Almost there. I'm downloading their prisoner database and facility schematics. We need to know what other horrors they have here." More guards were recovering now. The frequency disruption only lasted for a few minutes, and some of the Vorthak had stronger neural crowns than others. The freed prisoners were running low on captured weapons. Then Molech spoke. The chief researcher had been one of the worst affected by Hana's frequency attack, but its silver crown was more advanced than the others. It pulled itself upright, red eyes blazing with fury. "Impossible," it said, its voice distorted by neural crown damage. "Primitive species cannot defeat Vorthak technology." "You're wrong about that," Hana replied, keeping her weapon trained on the researcher. "Your technology is impressive, but it has a fatal flaw. You forgot how to live without it. You think this small victory matters? There are thousands of facilities like this one, millions of Vorthak warriors. Your pathetic escape changes nothing." Hana smiled. "It changes everything. Because now we know you can be beaten." Tyke's voice cut through their exchange. "Download complete. And Hana, you need to see this. They have detailed plans for attacking Earth. The invasion fleet launches in 6 months." The news hit Hana like a physical blow. 6 months. Not the years she had hoped for, but months. Earth had no idea what was coming. "Can you access their ship bays from here?" she asked. "Already working on it. If we can get to their docking area, there are several small ships that could get us off this world." A new alarm began blaring through the facility. Red lights flashed in patterns that hurt to look at. More guards would be coming soon. "We need to move," Juna said, her compound eyes reflecting the emergency lights. "My people have a saying, the successful hunter knows when to retreat." Hana looked around the laboratory one final time. 17 prisoners had entered this room. 14 were still alive and moving. Not perfect, but better than she had dared hope. "Tyke, lead us to the ships. Everyone else, stay together and watch each other's backs. We're not free yet." As they moved through the facility's corridors, following Tyke's navigation of the stolen schematics, Hana felt something she had not experienced in 4 years. Hope. They reached the ship bay without encountering major resistance. Most of the facility's guards were still dealing with the chaos in the main laboratory. Tyke quickly identified the smallest, fastest ship available. "It's a Vorthak scout vessel," he explained as they climbed aboard. "Fast, lightly armed, but it should get us to the edge of their territory." As the ship's engines powered up, Hana looked back at the facility that had been her prison for 4 years. Smoke was rising from several sections where their escape had caused system failures. "Where do we go now?" Minho asked. He looked lost without the routine of captivity. Hana studied the stolen data on the ship's computer. Star charts, military reports, prisoner logs from dozens of facilities. The scope of Vorthak operations was even larger than she had imagined. "We go to the Rim worlds," she said finally. "Neutral territory where we can warn others about what's coming." And then what? Hana thought about Earth, unaware of the fleet preparing to destroy it. She thought about the hundreds of other species suffering in Vorthak facilities across the galaxy. She thought about the terrified woman who had been captured 4 years ago and the person she had become. Then we fight back. The ship broke free of Koros's gravity and jumped to hyperspace. Behind them, alarms continued to wail in the facility. But for the first time in 4 years, Hana was not there to hear them. She was free, and she had work to do. The Rim worlds were exactly what their names suggested, the edge of known space where desperate people went to hide from galactic governments. Pirates, refugees, criminals, and anyone else who wanted to disappear found sanctuary in the scattered colonies that existed between the major powers. Hana's stolen Vorthak ship limped into the Nexus station 3 days after their escape. The vessel's engines were failing, and its stolen identification codes would not fool anyone for long. But it had served its purpose. They were free and far from Vorthak space. Nexus Station was a massive structure built inside a hollowed asteroid. Ships from dozens of species docked at its ports, trading everything from rare metals to information. It was the perfect place to disappear, but also the perfect place to find people who might listen to an impossible story. "Stay close," Hana warned her companions as they entered the station's main area. "We don't know who we can trust yet." The group drew attention immediately. 14 beings from different species, all showing signs of long captivity and recent violence. Other travelers gave them space, but Hana could feel eyes watching them from the shadows. They found a small cantina in the lower levels where the owner agreed to provide food and shelter in exchange for work. The Vorthak ship had yielded enough valuable components to trade for basic supplies, but money would run out quickly. That first night, Hana sat alone in their shared quarters, studying the data Tyke had stolen from the facility. What she found made her stomach turn. The Vorthak Empire was vast beyond imagination. They controlled nearly half the galaxy, with thousands of worlds under their rule. But they were not content with what they had. The files showed detailed invasion plans for hundreds of independent systems, including Earth. More disturbing were the biological warfare programs. The experiments Hana had endured were being repeated on thousands of other prisoners across dozens of facilities. The Vorthak were developing diseases tailored to destroy specific species, weapons that could wipe out entire civilizations without damaging the planets they wanted to claim. "It's worse than we thought," she told Tyke the next morning. "They're not just conquerors, they're planning genocide on a galactic scale." Tyke studied the data with his engineer's eye for detail. "Look at these resource allocation reports. They're moving massive amounts of equipment and personnel toward what they call Phase 7 operations. That includes the attack on Earth." 6 months, Hana said quietly. "That's all the time Earth has before the invasion fleet arrives, assuming we could even warn them. How do we get a message across half the galaxy? And who would believe us?" It was a good question. The stolen data was convincing, but Hana and her companions were escaped prisoners with no official standing. Their story sounded like the ravings of traumatized minds. The answer came from an unexpected source. Juna approached them that afternoon with news from her information gathering. The insect-like Kythera had spent the day listening to conversations. Throughout the station, "There are others," she said simply. "Survivors from Vorthak attacks. They meet in secret, sharing information and planning small raids on supply convoys." Hana felt a spark of hope. How many others? Dozens on this station alone. Maybe hundreds throughout the Rim worlds. Your escape has become quite famous. People are calling you the human who broke out of the impossible prison. That evening, Juna led them to a hidden meeting in the station's old mining tunnels. What Hana found there changed everything. Representatives from 20 different species filled the abandoned chamber. Some were military officers whose fleets had been destroyed. Others were government officials whose worlds had been conquered. A few were scientists like herself who had escaped from Vorthak research facilities. At the center of the group stood a tall woman with graying hair and scars across her face. She wore the uniform of the Earth Defense Force, though the patches were old and faded. "Commander Youngsu Park," she introduced herself. "Former commanding officer of the colony ship New Seoul. The Vorthak destroyed my ship and killed 1,200 civilians 2 years ago." Hana stepped forward. "Dr. Hana Kim, formerly of the research vessel Terra Nova. I've been a prisoner in their facility on Koros for 4 years. A murmur went through the crowd. The Koros facility was legendary among Vorthak victims, a place from which no one escaped. "You're the one who developed the neural crown frequency," said a reptilian creature Hana did not recognize. "My people have been trying to reproduce your technique for months." "I can teach it," Hana replied. "But we need to think bigger than small raids and individual escapes. I have data from their main computer systems. We can hit them where it really hurts." Over the next several hours, Hana shared everything she had learned. The invasion plans, the biological weapons, the weaknesses in their technology and psychology. The group listened with growing amazement and horror. "This changes everything," Commander Park said when Hana finished. "We've been thinking like refugees trying to hide and survive, but you're talking about fighting back on their own terms." "More than that," Hana replied. "I'm talking about turning their strengths against them. The Vorthak Empire is powerful because it's unified and coordinated, but that coordination depends on their technology. Disrupt the technology and you disrupt everything. An older alien with crystalline skin spoke up. My people, the Etherians, have been developing energy shield technology. We could protect ships from their weapons long enough to get close. The Deeplands Collective has biological computers that can't be affected by their neural crown frequencies, added another voice. We could coordinate attacks across multiple systems simultaneously. Hana felt the energy in the room changing. These people had been victims, but they were remembering how to be fighters. What about Earth? Commander Park asked. Even if we start hitting their supply lines and communication networks, can we warn your home world in time? Hana had been thinking about that problem for days. Not through normal channels, but the Vorthak have been monitoring human communications for years. They know more about Earth's defense capabilities than Earth's own military does. So we use their own communication networks against them. If we can capture one of their command ships, we can send a message directly to Earth using Vorthak encryption codes. Make it look like intelligence from their own sources. Tyke nodded slowly. It could work. Human intelligence services would have to take a warning seriously if it came through Vorthak channels, especially if it included data they could verify. That's a big if, Commander Park pointed out. Capturing a Vorthak command ship would require a major operation. We're talking about hundreds of people, dozens of ships, careful coordination across multiple systems. Yes, Hana agreed. We are. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. What Hana was proposing was not just resistance, it was war. You're asking us to unite dozens of species that have never worked together before, said the Etherian representative. To coordinate attacks across the galaxy using stolen technology and desperate volunteers. I'm asking you to save the galaxy, Hana replied. The Vorthak won't stop with Earth. They'll keep expanding until every free world is either conquered or dead. This is our chance to stop them while they still think they're invincible. Another long silence. Then Commander Park stood up. I lost my ship and my crew to these monsters. If there's a chance to strike back, I'm in. One by one, others around the room began to stand. Representatives of species that had been enemies before the Vorthak came. People who had lost everything, to the Empire's expansion. We'll need weapons, the reptilian delegate said. And ships, added someone else. And training. Most of our people have never fought together before. Hana listened to the planning begin around her and felt something she had not experienced since her capture 4 years ago. Not just hope, but purpose. She had started as a scientist studying alien plants, become a prisoner enduring alien torture. Then an escaped convict running from alien hunters. Now she was becoming something else entirely, a leader, a unifier, a person around whom the scattered enemies of the Vorthak Empire could rally. There's something else, she said, causing the planning discussions to quiet. The neural crown frequency I developed only works on standard Vorthak equipment. But I've been thinking about their psychology, their dependency on technology. I think we can do more than just disrupt their machines. What do you mean? Commander Park asked. Hana smiled, and for the first time in years, it was not an expression of pain or defiance. It was the smile of a predator who had found her praise. Weakness. We can teach them to be afraid. 6 weeks after the meeting on Nexus Station, Hana stood on the bridge of a converted cargo ship called the Unity. Through the viewports, she could see 12 other vessels of various sizes and origins. Human ships, Etherian crystal craft, Zarathi, engineering marvels, and half a dozen other designs she was still learning to recognize. It was not much of a fleet, but it was a start. Incoming transmission from the Kithara scout ship, reported Jiwan, a young human communications officer who had joined their cause after losing her family to a Vorthak raid. They found our target. Hana nodded to the main screen as it displayed the tactical information. A Vorthak supply convoy was moving through the Sigma Draconis system, carrying equipment to one of their forward bases. 3 ships, lightly defended, perfect for their first coordinated operation. All ships, this is Unity Command, Hana spoke into the communications array. Begin approach on the planned vectors. Remember, we want prisoners and data, not just destruction. The past 6 weeks had been a whirlwind of activity. Word of the escape from Koros had spread through the underground networks faster than Hana had expected. Survivors from dozens of worlds had made their way to the Rim territories, bringing ships, weapons, and most importantly, information about Vorthok operations. But bringing together so many different species had presented challenges Hana had not anticipated. The Etherians communicated through light patterns that most other species could not see properly. The aquatic deeplands representatives needed specially modified environments to survive in space. The territorial Saurian clans almost came to violence over ship placement in their formations. Hana had spent days mediating disputes and finding compromises. Her experience as a scientist helped. She was used to observing different systems and finding ways to make them work together. The key is understanding what each species does best, she had explained to Commander Park during one particularly difficult negotiation session. The Kythera are perfect scouts because they can survive in conditions that would kill most other people. The Etherians can create energy shields that protect against Vorthak weapons. The Zarathi understand their technology better than anyone except the Vorthak themselves. And humans? Park had asked. Humans adapt. We take all these different abilities and figure out how to use them together. Now, watching the mixed fleet move toward their target, Hana hoped she was right. Contact in 30 seconds, Jiwan reported. All ships report ready. The Vorthak convoy appeared on their sensors exactly where the Kythera scouts had predicted. 3 ships, 2 cargo vessels, and an escort destroyer. Standard formation for a low-priority supply run. All ships, execute pattern Alpha, Hana ordered. Free. Etherian ships moved first, their crystal hulls beginning to glow as they charged their energy shield projectors. Blue barriers of force appeared around the entire fleet, deflecting the Vorthak destroyer's first volley of weapons fire. Next came the Zarathi ships, their engines modified with captured Vorthak technology. They moved faster than the enemy could track, hitting the escort vessel's weapon systems with precisely targeted shots. Finally, the human and allied vessels moved in for the capture. Boarding pods launched from multiple ships, carrying mixed teams of fighters toward the cargo vessels. Hana led one of the boarding teams herself. She had insisted on participating in every operation, knowing that her people needed to see her sharing the risks. The interior of the Vorthak cargo ship was familiar to her after 4 years of captivity. Cold metal corridors, red emergency lighting, and the ever-present hum of machinery. But this time, she was not a prisoner. Neural crown frequency ready, she told her team as they advanced through the ship. The mixed group included Tyke, 2 human marines, a Kythera warrior, and a Saurian heavy weapons specialist. They encountered the first Vorthak guards at the main cargo bay. Hana opened her mouth and sang the frequency that had started her rebellion. The guards collapsed immediately, their neural crowns sparking and smoking. Still works, Tyke said with satisfaction as he secured their weapons. The cargo bay held exactly what their intelligence had predicted. Biological research equipment, computer cores containing prisoner data, and most importantly, communication logs that would reveal other convoy routes. This is better than we hoped. The Kythera warrior clicked excitedly. These logs show supply routes for 6 different systems. But Hana was studying something else in the cargo manifest. Medical supplies in quantities that suggested massive operations. Equipment for containing and transporting large numbers of prisoners. They're preparing for something big, she said quietly. Look at these numbers. This is enough medical equipment for millions of prisoners. Tyke studied the data over her shoulder. The invasion of Earth. They're not just planning to conquer it. They're planning to use the entire human population for their experiments. The thought made Hana feel sick, but it also strengthened her resolve. Every day they delayed meant more people would suffer what she had endured. The operation was completed in under an hour. All 3 Vorthak ships were captured with minimal casualties. More importantly, they had taken 17 Vorthak prisoners, the first time anyone had successfully captured members of the master race alive. Back aboard the Unity, Hana studied the intelligence they had gathered. The convoy routes would allow them to plan larger operations. The prisoner data revealed locations of other research facilities, but most valuable were the communication logs showing how the Vorthak coordinated their vast empire. "It's incredible," Jiwan said as she analyzed the communications equipment. "Their entire command structure depends on instantaneous communication across the galaxy. If we could disrupt that, we could paralyze their entire military," Commander Park finished. "But it would require hitting multiple communication hubs simultaneously. We're talking about operations across dozens of star systems." Hana looked around the strategy room at the representatives of different species. In 6 weeks, they had grown from 14 escaped prisoners to nearly 300 volunteers. Ships continued to arrive at their hidden base in an abandoned asteroid field, bringing more refugees and more stories of Vorthak brutality. "We need a name," she said suddenly. "What?" Park looked confused. "We need a name for what we're building, something that tells the galaxy who we are and what we stand for." The Etherian representative's crystalline form flickered with patterns of light. "My people would suggest the Resistance." "Too simple," the Saurian delegate growled. "We are not hiding in corners. We are fighting back." "The Liberation Alliance," suggested Tyek. "Because we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting to free everyone." Hana nodded slowly. "The Liberation Alliance. I like it. It says what we are and what we're trying to do." Over the following days, news of their successful convoy raid spread through the underground networks. More volunteers arrived, bringing stories that painted a clearer picture of the Vorthak Empire's expansion. The Florian Collective had lost 3 worlds to biological weapons testing. The Deeplands had seen entire cities dissolved by Vorthak war machines. The proud Saurian clans had watched their homeworld turned into a slave labor camp, but they also brought resources. The Florians contributed biological healing technologies that could keep wounded fighters alive longer. The Deeplands offered their aquatic cities as hidden bases. The Saurians provided heavy weapons and ships designed for long campaigns. "We're becoming something none of us expected," Commander Park observed during one of their planning sessions. "Not just a resistance movement, but a real alliance. Different species working together as equals." Hana studied the strategic display, showing their growing fleet. 47 ships now, with more arriving each week. Representatives from 32 different species, each contributing their unique abilities to the common cause. "The Vorthak Empire is built on the idea that one species should dominate all others," she said. "But what if we could prove that cooperation is stronger than domination?" "You're talking about more than just military victory," the Etherian representative observed. "You're talking about changing how the galaxy thinks about itself." "Maybe. But first we need to win this war." A new alarm sounded on the bridge. Jiwan's voice came over the communication system with urgency in her tone. "All senior staff to the command center immediately. We have incoming intelligence that changes everything." Hana hurried to the command center where a crowd had already gathered around the main display. What she saw there made her heart race. "One of our deep reconnaissance teams intercepted this transmission," Jiwan explained. "It's a priority message from the Vorthak High Command to their invasion fleet." The display showed a star chart with Earth clearly marked at its center. Around it, hundreds of red dots represented Vorthak ships moving into position. The scale of the invasion force was enormous. "How long?" Hana asked quietly. 3 months, Jiwan replied. The invasion has been moved up. Something has made them nervous enough to accelerate their timeline. Commander Park stared at the display. Our attacks. They know we're out here now, and they're worried about what we might do to interfere with their plans. The war room aboard the Unity had become the nerve center of the largest resistance movement in galactic history. Holographic displays showed star charts covering half the galaxy, with red markers indicating Vorthak positions and blue ones marking Liberation Alliance assets. The scale was daunting. Thousands of enemy positions against less than 200 Allied ships. Hana stood at the center of it all, studying intelligence reports that painted an increasingly grim picture. The Vorthak invasion fleet heading for Earth numbered over 800 ships. Even if the Alliance could mobilize every vessel in the Rim worlds, they would be outnumbered 4-1. "We can't win a straight fight," Commander Park said bluntly during their morning briefing. "We don't have the ships or the firepower to stop that invasion fleet." "Then we don't fight straight," Hana replied. Around the table sat representatives from 40 different species, each bringing their own perspective on warfare. The discussions had become increasingly heated as the invasion deadline approached. Some wanted to attack the fleet directly. Others suggested evacuating as many civilians as possible. A few recommended negotiating with the Vorthak leadership. Hana had been listening to all of them while developing her own plan. It was ambitious, dangerous, and required perfect coordination across the galaxy. But it was their only chance. "Show them the neural crown analysis," she said to Ji-won. The main display changed to show detailed schematics of Vorthak technology. 4 years of observation had given Hana insights that no one else possessed. "The Vorthak Empire is not actually as strong as it appears," she began. "Their greatest strength is also their greatest weakness. They depend completely on their technology for coordination, communication, and even basic decision-making," the Saurian delegate growled skeptically. "We know this. Your frequency attack proves it. But one human voice cannot disable an entire invasion fleet." "You're right. One voice can't. But what about 1,000,000 voices?" The room fell silent as the implications became clear. Hana continued, "The Vorthak have been studying us for years, collecting biological data on every species they encounter. They think they know how we work, but they've missed something crucial about humans and our allies." "What?" asked the Etherean representative. "We learn from each other. We adapt. We combine abilities in ways they never expect." Hana gestured to Tyke, who activated a new display showing communication networks across the galaxy. "Every Vorthak neural crown is connected to their central command network," Tyke explained. "It's how they coordinate operations across thousands of worlds. But that network has to be able to receive and process signals from billions of sources simultaneously." "Now imagine," Hana said, "if we could coordinate our own network, every member of every allied species, all producing the neural disruption frequency at exactly the same moment." The room erupted in discussion. Some voices were excited, others skeptical. The logistics seemed impossible. "How do we coordinate that many people?" the Deeplands representative asked. "Our species don't even use the same communication methods." "We use their own network against them," Hana replied. "We've captured enough Vorthak communication equipment to send signals across their entire empire. We make them deliver our weapon to themselves." Commander Park studied the tactical display with growing understanding. A galaxy-wide neural disruption event. It would shut down their entire command structure simultaneously. "For how long?" the Kathara warrior asked. "Long enough," Hana said. "While their neural crowns are offline, we hit their command ships, their communication hubs, their supply bases, everything at once before they can recover." The Florian representative made a sound like wind through leaves. "You're describing a coordinated uprising across the entire galaxy, millions of people, hundreds of worlds, all acting together." "Yes. It's impossible." "No," Hana said firmly. "It's never been tried. There's a difference." Over the next several days, they refined the plan. The neural disruption would be the opening move, but it had to be followed immediately by coordinated attacks on key Vorthak installations. The Alliance had grown to include resistance cells on over 300 worlds. Each would need specific targets and timing. The margin for error is essentially zero, Young-Soo warned during one planning session. The former colony commander had become Hana's chief military advisor. If any major element fails, the entire operation collapses. Then we make sure nothing fails, Hana replied. But even as they planned, disturbing news continued to arrive. The Vorthak were accelerating other operations as well. 3 more research facilities had been established. Biological weapons testing had increased. Entire species were being relocated to processing centers. They're preparing for total war, Minho reported after analyzing intercepted communications. The quiet human had become their chief intelligence analyst, his years of captivity having taught him to read Vorthak intentions. Not just conquest, but complete subjugation of every free world in the galaxy. The pressure was getting to everyone. Tempers flared during planning sessions. Some species threatened to withdraw from the Alliance if their specific concerns were not addressed. The Saurians wanted guarantees that their homeworld would be liberated first. The Etherians worried about protecting their crystal cities from Vorthak energy weapons. It was during one particularly heated argument that Kyung spoke up. The young Kithara female had been rescued from a Vorthak facility 2 weeks earlier and had become one of Hana's most trusted advisors. "You're all thinking like separate species," she said, her mandibles clicking in agitation. "But that's exactly what the Vorthak expect. They conquer us one world at a time because we think like individual worlds." "What do you suggest?" the Saurian delegate demanded. "Think like Hana thinks, like a human thinks. Not about what each species gets, but about what we can all accomplish together." Hana felt a surge of gratitude toward the young Kithara. Kyung is right. The Vorthak Empire succeeds because they have unity of purpose. They all work toward the same goal, expanding their power, but we have something they don't. "What?" several voices asked. "We choose to work together. They're forced to by their technology. When we win, we go back to being free peoples on free worlds. When they win, they just become more efficient slaves to their empire." The argument that followed that statement was the most intense yet, but when it ended, they had something they had never had before: true consensus. Not agreement reached through compromise, but shared commitment to a common vision. The Liberation Protocol, as they named their plan, would require precise timing across hundreds of worlds. The neural disruption event would begin at exactly 1400 hours, Galactic Standard Time. Every resistance cell would have 90 minutes to complete their primary objectives before Vorthak forces could reorganize. "What about Earth?" Commander Park asked during their final planning session. "Even if we succeed everywhere else, that invasion fleet will still reach human space." Hana had been saving this part for last. "We're not going to stop the invasion fleet." The room fell silent. "We're going to capture it." She activated a new display showing the projected route of the Vorthak invasion fleet. Their course would take them through the Tau Ceti system, which contained one of the largest Vorthak communication hubs in the galaxy. The fleet's command: "Ship contains the master control codes for every Vorthak vessel in that formation," Hana explained. "If we can take that ship during the neural disruption event, we can turn the entire invasion fleet against the Empire." 800 ships, Young-Soo said quietly. "If we could capture them intact, we'd have the largest fleet in galactic history," Hana finished. "Enough to liberate every world the Vorthak have conquered." The plan was audacious beyond anything they had attempted before. It required perfect coordination, flawless timing, and more than a little luck. But for the first time since the escape from Koros, Hana felt like they had a real chance of winning. 2 weeks, she announced. "That's how long we have to get everyone in position and coordinate the final details. 2 weeks to prepare for the largest military operation in galactic history." As the meeting broke up and representatives returned to their ships to spread the word, Mira approached Hana privately. The young human engineer had joined them after. Her colony ship was destroyed, and she had become one of the most skilled technicians in the Alliance. "Do you really think it will work?" she asked quietly. Hana looked out at the viewports showing their growing fleet. Ships from dozens of worlds, crews from species that had been enemies before the Vorthak came, all united by shared suffering and shared hope. 4 years ago, I was a prisoner who thought escape was impossible, she said. 6 months ago, we were a handful of refugees with one stolen ship. Now we're planning to liberate the galaxy. That's not an answer. Hana smiled. Yes, I think it will work, because the alternative is unacceptable. 2 weeks later, the Liberation protocol would either free the galaxy or destroy the only hope of stopping the Vorthak Empire. There was no middle ground. The moment had arrived. Across the galaxy, on 347 worlds, resistance fighters checked their chronometers and prepared for the largest coordinated operation in galactic history. In hidden bases, refugee camps, and underground shelters, millions of beings from dozens of species waited for the signal that would change everything. Hana stood on the bridge of the Unity, watching the tactical display that showed their target, the Vorthak command ship Dominion, flagship of the invasion fleet heading for Earth. Around her, the bridge crew made final preparations with the quiet efficiency of people who knew their lives depended on perfect execution. All strike teams report ready, Jiwan announced from her communications station. Neural disruption network is synchronized and standing by. Tau Ceti communication hub is in range, reported Kyung from the sensor station. Vorthak fleet formation is exactly as predicted. Hana felt the weight of command like a physical presence. Everything they had built, everything they had sacrificed, came down to the next few hours. She thought about the scared scientist who had been captured 4 years ago, and how that woman would never have imagined standing where she was now. All ships, this is Unity Command, she spoke into the fleet communication system. Liberation protocol begins in 60 seconds. Remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for every being who has ever suffered under Vorthak oppression. The final countdown began. Around the galaxy, resistance cells made their own final preparations. On Vorthak-occupied worlds, hidden groups of survivors emerged from underground bunkers and abandoned buildings. On neutral worlds, refugees who had fled the Empire prepared to strike back at their oppressors. Even on some Vorthak worlds themselves, enslaved populations readied themselves for uprising. 10 seconds, Jiwan called out. Hana opened her mouth and began to sing. The neural disruption frequency filled the Unity's bridge, but this time it was joined by millions of other voices across the galaxy. Human voices, Kythera clicking, Etherian light harmonics, Saurian roars, and sounds from species that had no names in any human language, all coordinated through the Vorthak's own communication network, all perfectly timed to arrive at every neural crown simultaneously. The effect was devastating. Every Vorthak ship in the invasion fleet suddenly went dark. Navigation lights flickered and died. The perfect formation began to drift apart as automated systems failed. Most importantly, the flagship Dominion stopped broadcasting command signals to the rest of the fleet. Neural disruption confirmed across all target areas, Kyung reported, her mandibles clicking with excitement. Vorthak communication network is experiencing complete systematic failure. All strike teams, execute, Hana ordered. The Unity and its escort ships rushed toward the disabled Vorthak flagship. Around them, hundreds of other operations began simultaneously across the galaxy. On Koros, the prison world where Hana had spent 4 years in captivity, Taek led a strike team of former prisoners back to the research facility. The guards' neural crowns had failed completely, leaving them helpless as the prisoners they had tortured for years took their revenge. "This is for everyone who died in your experiments," Tyke said to Molek as the former chief researcher cowered in his own laboratory. In the Sigma Draconis system, Saurian warriors stormed the supply depot that had been feeding the invasion preparations. Their natural resistance to energy weapons made them perfect for assaulting Vorthak defensive positions when the automated turrets went offline. On dozens of communication hub worlds, mixed teams of Alliance fighters destroyed the relay stations that coordinated Vorthak operations across entire sectors. Without these hubs, the Empire's vast military machine became a collection of isolated, confused units. But the most important battle was happening around the Dominion. "Boarding pods away," reported Commander Park from the Assault Coordination Station. "First wave is approaching the flagship." Hana led the main boarding team herself. The Dominion was massive, a ship designed to command fleets and coordinate invasions across multiple star systems. Taking it would require fighting through dozens of decks against an enemy that would recover from the neural disruption within minutes. The boarding pod hit the flagship's hull with a sound like thunder. Cutting charges burned through the armor. Plating and the Alliance strike team poured into the ship's corridors. The interior of the Dominion was unlike any Vorthak ship Hana had seen before. Instead of the utilitarian design of research vessels or cargo ships, this was clearly built for command functions. Wide corridors allowed for rapid movement of troops. Advanced computer terminals lined every wall. Most importantly, everything was connected to the massive command center at the ship's heart. "Resistance is lighter than expected," Minho reported, as his team advanced through the lower decks. "Most of the crew is still disoriented from the neural disruption, but not all of them." As Hana's team approached the main computer core, they encountered Vorthak soldiers whose neural crowns had been hardened against disruption. The firefight that followed was brutal and desperate. "We need that computer core," Hana shouted over, the sound of energy weapons. "Without access to the fleet command codes, this whole operation fails." Mira, the young engineer, sprinted across the corridor under covering fire from Saurian heavy weapons. Energy beams scorched the walls around her as she reached the main terminal and began working on the alien interface. "I'm in," she called out, "but their security systems are more complex than anything we've seen before. I need more time." "Time we don't have," Commander Park replied grimly. "My teams are reporting that Vorthak reinforcements are beginning to respond. The neural disruption is wearing off." Hana made a decision that would haunt her for years afterward. "All teams, fall. Back to the command center. We make our stand there." The next 20 minutes were the longest of Hana's life. Alliance fighters established defensive positions around the Dominion's command center, while Mira worked frantically to crack the fleet control systems. Outside, the disabled Vorthak ships were beginning to come back online as their crews recovered. "From the neural disruption." "How much longer?" Hana asked Mira. "Almost there. The command codes are more complex than we thought. The Vorthak really didn't want anyone else controlling their invasion fleet." A new alarm began sounding throughout the ship. Vorthak Marines were advancing through the corridors, their neural crowns now protected by emergency shielding that blocked further frequency attacks. "They're adapting faster than we expected," Kyung observed as she monitored the enemy advance. "We might not have enough time." But Hana had learned something important during her 4 years of captivity. Vorthak adaptations were always technological. They never expected their enemies to adapt psychologically. "Mira, stop trying to break their codes," she said suddenly. "What?" "But we need those command codes to control the fleet." "No, we don't. We need to convince the fleet to surrender. There's a difference." Hana moved to the ship's main communication system and began broadcasting on all Vorthak military frequencies. But instead of threats or demands, she did something no one expected. She told the truth. "Attention Vorthak fleet personnel," she began. "This is Dr. Hana Kim, former prisoner of Research Facility 7 on Koros. 4 years ago, you captured me and 17 other humans for your biological experiments. You thought you were taking helpless specimens." Throughout the fleet, Vorthak crew members listened in amazement as their own communication systems carried the voice of an escaped prisoner directly to their ships. "You were wrong," Hana continued. "You didn't capture specimens, you captured teachers. For 4 years you taught us how your empire works, how your technology functions, how your psychology operates. Most importantly, you taught us that you can be defeated." The fighting in the corridors around the command center had stopped. Even the attacking Vorthak Marines were listening. Today, across 347 worlds, the beings you conquered are rising up. Your communication networks are destroyed. Your command structure is in chaos. Your invasion fleets are stranded without orders. "But you have a choice," Hana said, her voice carrying to every ship in the fleet. "You can keep fighting for an empire that treats you like machines, or you can choose to be free. The Liberation Alliance offers amnesty to any Vorthak who abandons the Empire and helps us liberate the worlds you've conquered." For long moments, nothing happened. Then, one by one, Vorthak ships began broadcasting surrender signals. "This is impossible," one of the captured Vorthak officers said. "Our people do not surrender. Our people do not abandon the Empire." "Your people," Hana replied, "were never given the choice before." Within an hour, 637 ships of the Vorthak invasion fleet had surrendered to the Liberation Alliance. The remaining vessels that refused to surrender found themselves outnumbered 20-1 by their former allies. But the real victory was happening across the galaxy. Reports flooded in from resistance cells on hundreds of worlds. Communication, hubs destroyed, supply depots captured, research facilities liberated, entire Vorthak garrisons surrendering when they realized they were cut off from Imperial support. 5 years had passed since the Liberation War ended, and Dr. Hana Kim walked through the gardens of New Geneva on Earth, watching children from a dozen different species play together under the morning sun. Kythera younglings with their chittering laughter chased human children across carefully maintained grass. Young Etherians created light sculptures that delighted Saurian hatchlings, while Florian saplings swayed in harmonious dances that made everyone smile. It was a sight that would have been impossible before the war. Now it was simply another day. In the Galactic Covenant. "High Coordinator," a voice called behind her. Hana turned to see Juwan approaching with a data pad and the slightly harried expression that meant important business. "Just Hana," she corrected gently. "We've talked about this." Jiwan smiled but handed over the datapad anyway. "The council is ready for your address. The vote on the Vorthak rehabilitation program is scheduled for this afternoon." Hana nodded and took the pad, scanning the agenda for the day's session. Representatives from 47 different species would debate whether to expand the program that helped former Vorthak soldiers and civilians adapt to life without their neural crowns. It was controversial. Many species wanted harsher punishment for their former oppressors, but Hana believed it was necessary. "Any word from the Deep Space Exploration Initiative?" she asked as they walked toward the council building. "Tykes. Expedition has discovered 3 more systems with possible sentient life. No signs of advanced technology, but early biological surveys look promising." Hana felt a familiar excitement. Even with all her administrative duties, she was still a scientist at heart. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders they were only beginning to understand. The council chamber was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Designed by Zarathi architects, built with Saurian construction techniques, and decorated with Etherian light sculptures, it represented everything the Covenant stood for. Different species working together to create something none could have achieved alone. As she entered, the representatives rose in greeting. It still felt strange to Hana, being treated with such respect. She remembered the scared woman who had been dragged from that beautiful planet 9 years ago, and sometimes she wondered what that person would think of where she had ended up. "Thank you all for gathering," she said as she took her position, at the center of the circular chamber. "Before we begin today's formal session, I have an announcement that I think you'll all want to hear." The chamber fell silent. After 5 years, they had learned that Hana's announcements were usually significant. This morning, we received a message from Commander Youngsu's fleet in the Outer Rim territories, she said. The last Vorthak Imperial stronghold has surrendered. After 9 years of war and occupation, every world in the galaxy is now free. The cheering that erupted was unlike anything Hana had ever heard. 47 different species expressing joy in their own ways, creating a symphony of liberation that echoed through the chamber. Some wept openly, others roared with triumph. The Ethereans' light display was so brilliant it was almost blinding. When the celebration finally died down, the Kythera representative stood to speak. It was Elder Kyung, the same young fighter who had helped plan the Liberation War. "High Coordinator," she said formally. "On behalf of all species represented here, I want to say something that has needed saying for 5 years. You could have chosen to rule us. After the war, you controlled the largest fleet in galactic history. You had the loyalty of billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. You could have replaced the Vorthak Empire with a human one." Murmurs of agreement came from around the chamber. "Instead," Kyung continued, "you chose to create something new,